it is my awesome honor to welcome Mike McCarthy, General Manager of Marquee Sportsnet, to Craic and the Bat. Mike, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, especially on this holiday weekend, to come and spend a half hour with us and, tell some stories and, like the thing says, have the crack. So you're very welcome. I guess you're coming to us from Chicago?
From Chicago, and I'm the honored one, Shaun. I've been a fan of yours and Foley and John and the Irish American baseball movement for many years. So I'm truly honored one. But yes, we're coming to you from across the street from Lee Field in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, so are you in Murphy's, or no? You're close to Murphy's?
I'm right down the block, Murphy's.
Nice.
I'm familiar with Murphy's.
I'm familiar. I actually prefer the one on the other corner. Is it the Cubby Bear on the other corner?
You got the Cubby Bear. You got the Bernie's. They're all still here. Yeah.
Oh, very nice. So, Mike, you know what? You're a fascinating story, and I've been dying to. And you know what? We've met multiple times, but it's either been at something we've never had time to sit down and chat. So I want to go back before we go forward. So you're second generation, correct? Your grandfather came here?
Correct.
And your grandfather's from Mayo?
Yeah, my grandfather and grandmother both from Mayo.
Both from Mayo. We're not going to hold that against you.
Yes, you're supposed to God help us, right?
Yes, Mayo, God help us. Whereabouts in Mayo?
Lewisburg.
Oh.
Not far from Westport.
Yeah, nice. That's a nice part of the world.
Oh, sure is. Clue Bay.
It's one of the. I always tell people, whatever you do, you go to Ireland, go to Connemara, because Connemara is one of the few places in the world that's more beautiful when it's raining than when it's not.
Isn't that something? Yeah, you're right. You're right about that.
So I really want to talk to you first about your dad, Johnny. So you grew up in Queens, right?
I did. Flushing, Queens.
So what was your dad? So your dad was the first groundskeeper for the Mets, correct?
Yeah, he started with the Yankees. He didn't talk about that much, but in the 50s, he was the Yankees head groundskeeper for 3 years. And then the Mets hired him, and so he was the head groundskeeper for them in the Polo Grounds for 2 years. And then when they opened Shea, he was the head groundskeeper. And
then, right. So basically, because I was kind of curious, because he started with the Yankees. So it wasn't like all of a sudden he answered an ad in 1962 to become a groundskeeper. How did he get into that?
There was a company that he was working for called Allied Maintenance back in the day, and they had the contract for ground crew. And I guess they weren't as particular as they would be today with all the analytics and scientifics involved. I think it was just a little bit of hard work and a little bit of luck. Yeah.
So what? No, without giving away your age. So what age were you when he went to work for the Mets?
So he's 1962. I'm 2.
All right, you're 2. But so you have you would have wouldn't have any memories of the Polo Grounds. So 64, Shea opens. Your dad moves over,
right,
and then he becomes the head of stadium ops.
In 1974, he hands the head groundskeeper job over to his brother-in-law, who you knew very well. One of my favorite people in the world was Pete Flynn. And so it was like an Irish mob move. He put his brother-in-law in, and then he became the stadium manager. Yes. And there's the two of them right there.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I was looking up pictures of your dad and pictures that you posted on Facebook. And I mean, he passed, was it in 79?
No. He passed away in 1994.
94, because he's very familiar. It's like I've met him. I mean, and I can't say where, but it was so. Okay, so now your dad's in stadium ops, and so Pete married your dad's sister. Was that right?
That's right. Yeah.
I only met Mrs. Flynn a couple of times. She was a lovely woman, but I wouldn't like to cross her. And I was like, now I realize why Pete was a man of so few words, because I think Mrs. Flynn did the talking. And we're going to talk about Pete a little bit, but So, I mean, you grew up at Shea,
I
right?
did. I did. In fact, I was on the ground crew for a couple of years as a high school kid, which was a dream job. I mean, you couldn't imagine the stories and the fun. I mean, some pretty big baseball teams, but an awful lot of great memories.
That, I mean, that must have been just, I mean, so that would have been early, what, mid 70s?
Yeah, so I'm like 76 through 79. I'm on the ground. We'll call it the Lee Mazzilli era,
Ah,
kind of
yes.
a
And
low impact.
so I mean, you obviously have to have great memories. Now, one of the memories or one of the relationships that you built out of that was you were very close with Tom Seaver.
I had crazy relationship with Tom Seaver. I was like, he was my hero, as a kid. And my dad being on the ground crew, I was in a position to have a picture with him as a young boy. And then fast forward 20 years later, now he's reporting to me as a broadcaster for the Mets because I'm the executive producer for at the time Fox Sports New York, and he's our announcer. And I had to walk around the block when I realized that this was going on. I was like negotiating a contract with Tom Seaver, and I still can't believe it. And so we got very friendly, and I was able to go out and see his vineyard several times. And it's such a shame that vibrant personality isn't with us anymore. But he was a very special guy, and I was very blessed to be a part of his circle for a time.
Yeah, I mean, and what makes it all the more sad is when you think it was Lyme's disease.
Oh, I
You
know.
I mean, it's just,
I know.
I only have one Tom Seaver story that, the announcer with the Orioles, Gary,
Harry Thorne.
yeah, Gary Thorne. So Jeff Idelson, who's the Hall of Famer,
Yeah.
he calls me one night in December, or one day in December, says, "Hey, can you grab a suit and meet me at the Marriott Marquee at 6 o'clock?" Said, "I want you to come to the dinner as a friend of mine." So I raced home, picked up the suit, and back, and I said, "Can I bring some baseballs?" He says, "Bring as many as you can carry." So it turns out that that night was the MLB Players Association alumni dinner. And the Hall of Fame had a table, and there was a seat free at the table, and he invited me, and I was just blown away. But I was more so blown away by, there was a VIP reception beforehand in one of the suites for all of the Hall of Famers. And there were, I think, 15 Hall of Famers in the room. So I went in, so I was like blown away. And of course, I've got maybe 25 baseballs burning a hole in my pocket. And I'm looking to see who I had. And Gary Thorne and Seaver are standing on one side talking. So I approached them, I introduced myself, and then I said, "Mr. Thorne, would you mind signing this baseball for me?" And Seaver looked at me, and Seaver looked at Thorne, and said, "What the F?" He said, "This is the first time ever," he said, "I've been overlooked." He said, "And for you, but I already had a Seaver ball, and I wanted, it was an opportunity to get the Gary Thorne ball." So for the couple of times I met him afterwards, he'd look at me and he'd say, "You're the guy who snubbed me for Gary Thorne." He's like, "I don't know how I feel about that," but it was you're right. I mean, it's sad that the game is losing personalities like that, and it's sad that he's gone before I mean, it's great that he's going to get all these accolades and they're going to put up a statue to him. But I mean, it's kind of similar to, now you're in Chicago, the fact that Ron Santos in the Hall of Fame after he died. I mean,
It's a shame. It is a shame.
So I do. So before we move on, before we get away from your groundskeeper, what's this about water fights with Jerry Kuzma?
Oh, those are epic stories between my uncle Pete, the head groundskeeper, and Jerry Kuzman, where they would sneak on each other. Never on a day where Jerry was pitching, but any other day was full season, where one would hit the other with a water balloon. And then years later, when Kuzman came back to Shea as a member of the Phillies, he would sneak in separately and get into Pete's office, and everybody was willing to help Jerry hit Pete with a water balloon. And that saw them do it 2 years ago, just before Pete actually passed. Again, they snuck Jerry in, and he threw water on Pete again. It was this. They probably did it to each other a million times. It was very, very funny. Great tradition.
Very funny. Actually, I recently talking to Rob Drummerhauser, who was the who had the job that I always wanted to have in the bullpen catcher. I was always said, I was like, that's the only job I want. Well, now there's a new one because all these teams have quality control coaches. I'm like, I think I could be a quality control coach. And I think the Rangers have something called a situational awareness coach. I'm like, I think I could teach them that. Like, hey, you're in, just go that way. 90 feet that way, 90 feet that way, 90 feet that way, and then you come home. So Rob was telling me a great story about Pete. I mean, listen, the one thing was the amount of people that I met over the years, and it would be one of the first questions they ask is like, how's Pete doing? You know, and he was a very humble guy and a man of few words. He was the perfect guy whenever he got an award because he normally got up and said thank you. The only one he spoke more than we said thank you was when we inducted him into the Hall of Fame. And I think the only reason for that was his sister was there and he was scared of his sister.
Yeah, I think we all were, but yes.
Yeah, you're right about that. But Rob told a great story. So Rob, this was back obviously when the Jets were sharing Shea.
Yeah.
And Rob would always torture Pete about just how bad the Jets sucked. So one day during batting practice, Pete's in his office, which was like right behind home plate, and he sends for Drummerhauser. And so Drummerhauser walks in and the door closes, and he doesn't hear the door, but the door closes behind him. And Rob proceeds to bust Pete's balls about how bad, how the Jets suck. And all of a sudden there's a noise behind him. Drummerhauser turns around and Pete's got 3 members of the sack exchange behind the door. Rob said he almost wet himself. So that's pretty cool. So that's how you got your start.
Well, can I tell you a quick one about being on the ground crew where Pete and my dad, and my other uncle Owen, who you've also met, he lives out in Lake Grove. They pulled a prank on me one day before a ball game that involved a French horn. Have you ever heard of this French horn trick that they did?
No.
In the locker rooms? Well, anyway, I was a very thin kid and I ran cross country, not well, but I ran it to keep in shape. So I ran every day. So they have a night game, I'd be running around the outfield track. Ed Cranepool, of course, you remember Ed, grabbed me and said, do you run every day? And I said, I do. And do you smoke? I said, no, I don't smoke. He said, do you smoke anything? I said, no, I don't smoke anything. So he walks me into the clubhouse and there's Tom Seaver and Neil Allen and Lee Misley and the Mets of the day. And there's a big pile of money. Little did I know that Pete and my dad and Owen were all hiding in different lockers watching this. And they were betting on whether I could get a sound out of this French horn they had. And they were saying, sometimes a big fellow like Greg Luzinski come in here and he can't get a peep out of it because he's got bad lungs. You said you don't smoke. I said, I don't smoke. And then another guy, a little pipsqueak like Buddy Harrelson, can come in and get a big sound out of it. So anyway, they're betting on it, and they're just big kids, so they'll bet on anything. So just take a deep breath, Cranepool tells me, and just blast it away. Give it all you got. So of course, if you know anything about a French horn, it comes up and faces you right at the eye. Well, so it's loaded with talcum powder. I mean, that's the gag. So I blast into it and bang, my whole face is white. All you can see is my eye blinking. And the team is on the ground writhing, all of them. And my father and my Uncle Owen and my Uncle Pete came falling out of the lockers laughing. I was humiliated beyond words. So they got me good with that one.
That's pretty cool. And the sad part is that doesn't happen anymore.
It is sad.
Because the thing is, just from talking, well, you know what? It's funny. Clubbies, they kind of love it now because guys come in after the game, they get on their phones, they shower, and they leave. There's none of the, a couple of cases of beer have been rolled into the middle of the floor and sitting back and telling baseball stories. And, that's true. The sad part of the game as it's gone on. So Holy Cross, what is the Nightcap Tavern?
Oh, come on. This guy's done his homework. That's a very high-end establishment.
Sounds it.
New York. In Poughkeepsie, New York. You can tell how high-end it was, but they had red shag carpet on the wall. Oh. So it's kind of a 5-star, location. And it was a bit of a campus hangout for those of us that had completed our studies early in the day, like me at Marist College. So Nightcap Tavern was my first position of any importance there. It was a bartender, Mr. Clancy, which you can respect. And I guess I gave away more than I charged for, so it was not a long run for me there, but we did have some fun at the Nightcap.
Very nice. So you're fresh out of Mars now, and that was your first job at MSG?
Yeah, I was an intern at the Garden through Marist, and so I got hired right after I graduated. In fact, I was told they would hire me when I graduated. So I never did a resume, and I can't. Yeah, in my second to last semester was the internship. They told me they're going to hire me. So I don't know how you could take a semester of college less seriously than I took my last semester. But I had a job. I was in,
Yeah.
So I don't know how I'm even alive right now. But anyway,
No.
yes, I started right off the Garden.
What was your first position?
Production assistant, entry level, move your way up, coffee, etc. I had lucky enough, I don't know if you're a basketball fan, but when I was at that level, I would sit next to Marv Albert and give statistics of the Knick games. And I got promoted several times, surprisingly, and every time I got promoted, my seat worsened. Right, I went from the 50-yard line of Madison Square Garden courtside to I'm out in the parking lot in a truck. Like I'm not even in the arena anymore. But we had a lot of fun over the years at the Garden, that's for sure.
So, I mean, you were there through some bad years, but you were also there probably for one of the greatest runs, which was the early 90s.
That year, 94, I was at every game home and away of the Knicks finals and the Ranger finals. I got a ring from Mike Keenan and Neil Smith in 94, and I have a lot of great memories from those years. But yeah, the Garden was sold out every night. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And we had the rights to Yankees and the Mets.
Yeah.
So we had just about everything you wanted to have in New York sports on MSG.
Ultra Wigan, Deb Kaufman. I had a crush on Deb Kaufman for years.
I'll be sure not to tell
actually,
that.
now you mentioned 94, the Stanley Cup 94. I was here a couple of years at that stage. Never really a big hockey fan. People used to say to me, like, why don't you like hockey? And I was like, listen, I wanted to watch grown men falling around the place and fighting. I said, I would have stayed in Ireland. And 91, I was here probably about 3 weeks, and a friend of mine said, come on, we're going to a hockey game. And it's going to be a great game. It's the Islanders Rangers. I'm like, okay. I'm like, no idea. Of the four major sports, I had never played. I don't have a center of gravity, so being on skates was foreign to me. So it didn't really mean anything to me. So we go to the game, and I'm reading the program, and I'm trying to, take in as much as I can. And of course, the Garden is chanting Potvin sucks and Potvin beats his wife. So I'm going through the program, and I'm going down through the Islanders roster, and there's no one called Potvin here. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a Ranger they don't like, so I'm going down the road. I'm like, these stupid people, they're chanting at somebody and he's not even here. So the first period ends and everybody gets up. We're up in the blue seat. So the first period ends, everyone gets up and goes to the bathroom. And I said to my buddy, so it's just this is what you do. So, sit back down, still oblivious. Now, this was 91. So as you well know, 91, neither the Islanders or Rangers are very good. Second period starts, same thing happens. The second period ends, sorry, same thing happens. Everyone gets up and leaves, and I'm still oblivious as to what's going on. And then this guy says to me, he says, you look like Ty Domi. So who's Ty Domi? He said, oh, he's a professional hockey player. I'm like, oh, excuse me, that's pretty good. And then I find out he's a goon. And I was like, not so good. So then the third period ends. And everyone gets up, and I'm sitting there, and the guy says to me, what are you doing? I said, I don't need to pee, I'm all right. He says, no, we're leaving. So what do you mean we're leaving? He said, the game's over. I said, 3 periods? I said, doesn't everything either have 2 halves or 4 quarters? Like, how is this hockey screwed up? And I don't think I went to another hockey game. I think the next hockey game I went to was when the Rangers played the Flyers in Citizens Bank and froze my ass off. And I was like, you know what? That's what I love about baseball, because if it's inclement weather, they don't play. But back to 94, I worked the door as a bouncer in a place called the Molly Wee on 8th Avenue.
Sure.
At that stage, the closest bar for games 5 and 7. two of the scariest nights I've ever put in, because as you remember, game 5, they lost.
I remember very clearly.
They were scared because they had to go back to, where is it, Ottawa? They had to go back for game 6.
Vancouver.
And then game 7, you're dealing with a happy crowd, and it's the hardest crowd to deal with because everybody wants to pick everybody up, and there's people falling around the place. It's a tougher crowd to deal with. But I did get after they gave the keys of the city to the Rangers, a buddy of mine what they did was the NYPD gave a police escort to 2 Rangers. They each had a cop car to take them wherever they wanted to go. And a buddy of mine called me and he's like, hey, and this is late at night. He says, are you bartending? And he said, yeah. He said, come outside. So I put outside and this, cop car pulls up and there's 2 Rangers. I think Esatikin may have been one of them, but they're passed out in the back of this squad car. And he's got the Stanley Cup buckled into the front seat. So that's the closest I got to the Stanley Cup. But that was, I know, obviously, you had both the Rangers and the Knicks at the same time.
Yeah, it was crazy. And the Knicks came very close, as you might recall. John Starks had a 2 for 18 shooting performance. Yeah. One of them goes in and get a ring too. But it was one hell of a year. And I have vivid memories of producing the home video after that Rangers season, and one guy in the club that held up a sign, now I can die in peace. Yeah. Because it had been since 1940. So very cool.
There's a lot of guys who had to get married, who didn't want to get married, who had told their significant others, I'll marry you as soon as the Rangers win the Stanley Cup. I knew 2 of those, Yeah, because it was like, I'll never forget the night. There were 4 things happened. Actually, 5 things happened the same day. Rangers got the key of the city. The Knicks were playing, I think it was game 5. We had the OJ chase.
Yeah. It
was the opening ceremonies of the 94 World Cup. And John Cicada fell through the stage actually at the Silverdome in Detroit. And I was bartending the Wolf Tones in the Tower View.
Is that right?
And all the same night, they brought in this transistor TV to put in the corner of the bar, and that was a scary place because the people they'd exceed the capacity by about a gazillion people, and there were so many people jumping up and down that the bottles would fall off the back of the bar.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, one of these days we're going to all fall through the floor into the bar underneath. So let's go back. So we're at MSG. We're rising the ranks of MSG. And then you go to St. Louis.
I go to St. Louis. Well, that's a normal path, isn't it? To go from Madison Square Garden to St. Louis. No, there's I had 23 years at the Garden, and it kind of run its course. And the ownership there presented a unique set of circumstances. We'll say that. And folks like myself and many others decided to look around something else, a new challenge. And so a guy named Dave Checketts and a few other colleagues bought the St. Louis Blues,
right,
and asked me to play a leadership role there. And I had a great time there and was responsible for the arena and the hockey team. And I'll tell you one funny story. You probably know the name John Davidson, who was the Rangers commentator, a great guy, and he was the team president. And I was the CEO there, and he reported to me. The one particular game, there was a player on the Blues named Keith Tkachuk.
Yeah.
And he gets into the boards and he skates off kind of groggily. And JD, John Davidson, calls down to the trainer, happens to be a Long Island kid named Ray Burrill. And he says, "Ray, how's Walt?" And Ray says, "Well, he's not too good, Johnny. I mean, he's walking around back here, but he doesn't know where he is. And he thinks his name is Wayne." And JD says he thinks his name is Wayne. Tell him his last name's Gretzky and get him back out on the ice. Maybe he'll get 6 goals before he remembers who he is. So, yeah, we were off to St. Louis and we had a lot of laughs there, and we almost won the damn thing. I mean, we went through 2 rounds. We swept the Sharks, and then this Jonathan Quick, son of a bitch goalie from the Kings, stood on his head and stopped everything we shot at him. And we didn't. Otherwise, we would have had our own Stanley Cup in St. Louis. So it was a lot of fun out there. and a great Irish community out in St. Louis.
Very much so. Very much so. So obviously the next career path is, well, if you're going to leave St. Louis, we're better to go to Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a normal path here. There are a lot of people. I mean,
Well, you know what it is basically, Mike. This is basically like an Irishman going home.
That's right.
It's not always the most. Not like you've been on the roads in Ireland; they're a bit windy. So I mean, it's
Right.
So
when I was
you go to Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I lived in a place there called the Irish Crossroads, which is a section of bars. There's about 15 Irish bars, all owned by the same guy, by the way, in Milwaukee. And I was the COO there of the Bucks. And to make a long story short, when I get hired by whether it's the Blues or the Bucks or currently the Cubs, the impression is that team is probably starting their own television network. That's really what was going on.
Right.
And in the Cubs case, it actually happened. In the other two cases, Blues and Bucks, it was actually a little bit of a credible threat that didn't happen, but the teams ended up doing pretty well for themselves to the fact. So anyway, fun positions, fun opportunities, and this is probably the topper here in Wrigley with this fan base and this crazy passion that they have for baseball. So we're really excited to be a part of it.
But I mean, this one has to be had to be the toughest, because I mean you're replacing WGN to to a whole generation. I mean, there's a whole generation of people, not just in Chicago, who their introduction to baseball was WGN. Because I mean, even down here, I was at a Clearwater Threshers game last night watching some really bad baseball, and so I took a guy with me, and so he's from Tampa. So I said, well, you didn't have a team growing up. He's like, no, he said, I was a Cubs fan. He said, because not only not only were the games on TV, but he said the games were on TV at 2:00 in the afternoon every day. He said, if you live in Florida, what happens at 2:00 every day during the summer? It rains. So you go in and watch the Cubs game.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of pressure from that respect. And then of course you're just getting ready to kick off, and COVID hits.
Yeah, that was not in the playbook to launch a network in a pandemic. There's not a lot of folks that tried that. We had a big challenge on our hands and a great team that put the effort together. You're absolutely right about the pressure to replace the legacy of WGN. As you said, not just Chicago, but across the country. And, time change and people make adjustments, and organizations that have to identify at times new opportunities for revenue. And that's really where the Cubs were the last team really that didn't have some kind of an equity stake in their own regional sports network. Obviously in New York, the Yankees, the Mets, Red Sox, Dodgers, et cetera. So they stepped into the 20th century and put a network together, asked me to play a role, which I was really excited about. And, when the pandemic hit, our primary goal really was to somehow get on the air, but keep everybody safe. And it was harrowing for all of us. But when we were coming in the office, 60 people at a time, putting this thing together, and for the most part, pretty well terrified that somebody was going to get sick. And it didn't happen. And I don't think it was because we were only careful, although we were. I think we were more lucky than careful.
Yeah.
We got through it. We did the crazy 60 games last year that everybody else did. But that was our first season. So that was very unique. Now, now we have a regular season with 100% capacity in Wrigley. We're traveling announcers, which I think we're the only RSN to do that. And we've got Boog Shambi calling play-by-play for us.
No Boog, well, good guy.
Good guy, big fan of yours. I will. He's a big fan of yours. And, he was asked in one of the interviews how he felt about replacing Harry Carey, speaking of legends. And did he realize that Harry drank during a game? And he said, well, I heard stories about that. And I think that the booth is an office and a place of business, and I take it very seriously. But out of respect for Harry, I'm willing to try to make it work. So we've a good situation on our hands here with some good folks.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and obviously, I remember you got a great product, and as you said, you've got a passionate fan base, and obviously you got a passionate fan base that has finally won. So that's got to be good. So listen, Mike, I really appreciate this. We're going to wrap this up very quickly. I do have one question for you. So now, are you a New York pizza guy, or have you gone over to the dark side and you're now a deep dish guy?
There is no pizza here. There's no shredder. There's no rumors about it. They have something that they refer to it as pizza, but it's not. It's not. I think Jon Stewart said it's like it's something that you would flip a coin in and make a wish, and you'd wish for a real pizza. That's what his description.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
When you're on the subject, I mean, did you buy into the St. Louis pizza? Because, like, obviously, we were the home of the Cardinals. Here's the thing: they use that Provel cheese. I had to get it specially ordered from a place. You can't burn that stuff. It should be. They should use it for. And I said to people, I said, "How in the world? First of all, you cut it into squares, which doesn't make any sense." I said, "And you put this stuff on it that doesn't burn." I mean, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So
I got a question for you, though, Shaun.
Yes, sir.
What's the update on Foley's? What's the?
Well, I mean, Mike, to be honest with you, to give you the short answer, because we're short on time here. I took 2021 off to see what was going to happen, and we're halfway through that. I mean, things are tough in New York. I mean, I love and I miss the hospitality business. Kind of part of why I went to work at Publix, because I wanted to work with people who have an appreciation for customer service, and Publix do that. So basically what I'm doing is all my memorabilia is safely stored in Astoria, and we're just waiting to see what happens. I mean, ideally what I would like to do is I'm planning and hoping that there's a 2.0. I would prefer it to be more the face of the organization as opposed to the operator, because I don't know, my heart will deal with the stress that goes with running it. But we're efforting and hoping. But just for right now, I just I'm treating it a bit like Bob Uecker used to treat when they asked Bob Uecker, they said, how do you catch a knuckleball? He said, you just wait till it stops rolling. So I'm just waiting for this ball to stop rolling, and then when it happens, hopefully, we plan to relaunch the Irish Hall of Fame. We plan to and so, like I said, but I don't know where that could be. I mean, ideally, I would love to go back to New York, but I think New York's about 5 or 6 years from being back to where it was. And that's kind of where we're at,
Well, good luck to you on that, Shaun.
Well, hopefully we get together soon. Mike, if you ever make it to Florida.
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in delightful Dunedin.
God bless you. Okay.
Right by, not far from Clearwater. And, it's, I have to say, it's a little slice of heaven here. It's like, it's very peaceful and calm. It's everything that 33rd Street wasn't. But listen, you have a wonderful weekend, and to everybody that's listening, you have a wonderful and safe July 4th weekend. This has been Craic in the Bat with my good friend Mike McCarthy and John Fitzgerald, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, fellas.
Take care.
Thanks, Mike.